It was an especially cold night in Riverside, one of those rare occasions when the biting wind seemed to carry all the despair and loneliness of the city. Dr. Michael Carter was leaving the hospital after a 16-hour shift. The fatigue weighed heavily on his shoulders, and all he wanted was to get home and lose himself in the arms of his wife Laura. But fate had other plans for him that night. As he walked to the parking lot, Michael heard a faint, almost imperceptible sound coming from a nearby alley. Curious and driven by his caregiver instinct, he approached. What he found made his heart tighten. There, huddled against the cold, damp wall, was a frail-looking man, clearly homeless. The man was shivering from the cold and was in critical condition, with purple lips and irregular breathing. Michael knelt beside him, feeling the urgency of the situation. "Hey, can you hear me?" he asked, his voice soft but firm. The man opened his eyes with difficulty and murmured something inaudible. Michael knew he needed to act quickly. The man was suffering from hypothermia and possibly other complications. Without wasting time, Michael took off his coat and covered the man, trying to offer some warmth. He quickly checked the vital signs. The pulse was weak and irregular, and the breathing was shallow. He needed to stabilize him before thinking about taking him to the hospital. "Stay with me, I'm going to help you," Michael said, his voice filled with determination. He grabbed his phone and called for emergency services, explaining the situation and requesting an ambulance urgently. While waiting, Michael did what he could to keep the man conscious, talking to him and constantly checking his vital signs. He remembered a first aid kit he kept in his car, parked just a few meters away. He ran to the vehicle, grabbed the kit, and returned to the alley. With skilled and experienced hands, he administered a dose of intravenous glucose, suspecting possible hypoglycemia. At the same time, he monitored the man's temperature, trying to warm him with blankets he found in the trunk. The ambulance arrived quickly, and Michael helped the team transfer the man to the stretcher. Throughout the ride back to the hospital, he stayed by the patient's side, giving instructions to the medical team and ensuring everything was done to stabilize the man. As Michael Carter helped the team stabilize the homeless man in the freezing alley, his thoughts were in turmoil. The man before him was in critical condition, and every second counted. Michael knew taking the homeless man to the hospital was the right decision, but the potential consequences haunted his mind. The hospital was overwhelmed. Recently, the administrative board had implemented strict policies on treating uninsured patients, and Michael had already faced reprimands for challenging these guidelines. He knew well the ethical and moral dilemma this situation represented. The choice between following the hospital's rules or honoring his oath to save lives, regardless of the circumstances. "I can't leave him here," Michael thought, his determination strengthened by the sight of the debilitated man. The memory of his sister, who had died due to a lack of adequate care, resurfaced with full force. He had promised himself never to let anyone suffer as she did. As the ambulance approached, Michael felt the weight of responsibility grow. His colleagues knew the risk he was taking and respected him for it, but the administration did not share the same sentiment. "If I don't do this, he might die here," he pondered, his gaze fixed on the man's pale face. He remembered a recent case where a colleague was suspended for a similar incident. The pressure to keep costs low and beds available was immense. "What if they lose trust in me? What if I lose my job?" Doubt tried to creep in, but Michael's determination was stronger. The ambulance siren grew louder, and Michael made his decision. "His life is worth more than any rule," he said to himself, reaffirming his commitment to medical ethics and human value. He helped load the man into the ambulance and got in, ready to face any repercussions. On the way to the hospital, Michael took a deep breath and looked at the homeless man, now with an oxygen mask and vital signs being monitored. "You're in good hands," he whispered, more to himself than to the patient. He knew facing the administration would be tough, but he also knew he could sleep in peace, certain he had made the right choice. At the hospital, the medical team was prepared for a new emergency. Dr. Michael Carter and the emergency team worked tirelessly to stabilize the homeless man he had found. Upon entering the emergency room, the environment transformed into a controlled frenzy of activity. "Patient with severe hypothermia, weak pulse and irregular breathing," Michael reported as the team transferred the man to the stretcher. The nurses quickly connected the patient to monitors, administered intravenous fluids, and began warming him gradually. Dr. Susan Walker, the head of the emergency department, gave Michael a concerned look. "We're overwhelmed, Michael. This man has no insurance. We know the administration won't like this," she said, but continued to coordinate the necessary care without hesitation. The room was filled with murmurs of doctors and nurses working in sync, each playing their crucial role. Michael watched every move closely, ensuring the treatment was flawless. Despite his exhaustion, the adrenaline of saving a life kept him focused. Hours later, when the homeless man was finally stabilized, Michael retreated to a quiet corner of the hospital, feeling the weight of the day pressing down on him. Susan's words echoed in his mind. He knew that bringing that man to the hospital without insurance was against recent policies, but there was no other choice. The ethical dilemma was overwhelming. Michael thought about the oaths he had taken when becoming a doctor. "Save lives above all," he murmured to himself, recalling the principles that always guided his actions. However, the reality of hospital administration was different, more focused on numbers and regulations. Sitting in his office, he knew a storm was brewing. The hospital director, Dr. Richard Stevens, was a strict man who had previously warned Michael. The tension between medical duty and administrative rules had never been so palpable. Shortly after, as expected, Michael was summoned to the director's office. Dr. Stevens had a stern expression and a file in his hands. "Dr. Carter, you know bringing in uninsured patients puts a huge financial strain on the hospital," he began, his voice heavy with disapproval. Michael took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "Dr. Stevens, I understand the hospital policies, but at that moment, leaving that man without help was not an option." "He was dying," he responded, his voice firm and resolute. "This could cost you your job, Michael," Stevens warned, not breaking eye contact. "I know," Michael said, his voice now softer but still determined. "But as doctors, our primary duty is to save lives. Rules are important, but human life should be our top priority. This man, regardless of his financial status, deserved a chance to live." The silence in the office was heavy, laden with tension and expectation. Dr. Stevens remained silent for a long moment, weighing Michael's words. Finally, he sighed deeply. "You've always been one of our best doctors, Michael. Your commitment to your patients is undeniable. I'll talk to the board, but know this won't be easy." Michael nodded, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. "Thank you, Dr. Stevens. I know it won't be easy, but I believe I did the right thing." As he left the office, Michael felt a sense of inner peace. He knew he had made the right decision, standing up not only for his patient, but also for the principles that always guided his life as a doctor. Regardless of the consequences, he was at peace with himself, confident that, in the end, humanity and compassion should always prevail. Dr. Michael Carter woke up every day at 5:30 a.m., while the silence of the early morning still enveloped the city of Riverside. Upon arriving at the hospital, Michael was greeted by the familiar aroma of disinfectant and the muffled sound of hurried footsteps. His day began with a quick meeting with the medical team, where they discussed the most urgent cases and patient needs. Michael was known for his meticulous attention and dedication to each patient, treating everyone as if they were his own family. He spent most of the day between consultations, surgeries, and bedside visits. Whenever possible, he talked to the patients, offering words of encouragement and detailed explanations about their treatments. His presence was a relief to many, as they knew they were in good hands. The grueling routine did not faze him. On the contrary, it seemed to strengthen him, reinforcing his commitment to the health and well-being of every individual who came under his care. Michael's motivation to work in a high-demand, resource-limited area came from a deeply personal experience. When he was young, he had lost his younger sister to a disease that could have been treated if they had had access to better medical care. The pain and helplessness he felt at that moment were transformed into a driving force that propelled him to pursue a medical career. Michael chose the city where he lived precisely because of the challenges faced by the local community. The area was lacking in adequate medical resources, and many residents lived in precarious conditions. He felt a moral obligation to make a difference, to be the change he wished he had seen in the past. Each day was a new opportunity to honor his sister's memory and help those who might otherwise be neglected by the healthcare system. Although his career was incredibly demanding, Michael strived to maintain a balance between work and personal life. He was married to Laura, a dedicated teacher who understood and supported his commitment to medicine. Together they had 2 children, Emily and Lucas, who were the light of his life. Michael valued every moment he spent with his family, from home-cooked dinners to weekend walks in local parks. These simple moments were essential to recharge his energy and remind him of the reasons he worked so hard. Laura and the kids were his safe haven, offering him unconditional love and support, enabling him to return to the hospital every day with renewed vigor and determination. On his rare days off, Michael enjoyed participating in community activities, such as vaccination drives and health education programs, strengthening his bond with the community he served. Michael's personal life was not just an escape from his hard work, but an extension of his commitment to the care and well-being of those around him. News of Michael's actions quickly spread throughout the hospital. The next day, he was summoned to a meeting with the board of directors. The atmosphere in the conference room was tense. Hospital director Dr. Richard Stevens sat at the head of the table, flanked by board members, all with grave expressions. "Dr. Carter, we know you're aware of why you're here," Stevens began, his voice firm but controlled. "Your decision to treat an uninsured patient was a direct violation of our policies." Michael looked around the room, seeing familiar faces, some showing sympathy, others disapproval. He took a deep breath, feeling the tension in the air. "Yes, I am aware," he replied calmly, "but I couldn't, in good conscience, abandon that man. He was on the brink of death." One of the administrators, Mrs. Anderson, interjected. "Dr. Carter, we understand your perspective, but we have rules for a reason. The hospital is facing a financial crisis. We need to ensure we can continue serving the community." Michael leaned forward, trying to maintain his composure. "I understand the financial difficulties, but our primary duty is to save lives. We can't let bureaucracy and policies dictate who lives and who dies." Stevens sighed, visibly frustrated. "Michael, your passion for medicine is admirable, but we need our doctors to follow established guidelines. This isn't the first incident. The board needs to make a difficult decision." The silence that followed was crushing. Michael felt a lump in his throat but kept his gaze steady. Finally, Stevens spoke again. "Dr. Carter, it is with great regret that we must inform you of your termination, effective immediately." The words hung in the air, heavy and irrevocable. Michael felt a chill run down his spine. He had anticipated this possibility, but hearing the final verdict was a hard blow. "I understand," he said, his voice laden with sadness but also acceptance. As he stood to leave, some board members averted their eyes, unable to face the scene. Others seemed genuinely regretful. Stevens escorted him to the door. "Michael, this is not something we wanted to do. Your dedication is unquestionable. I hope you understand the position we are in." Michael nodded, trying to process the avalanche of emotions. "Thank you, Dr. Stevens. I know you're in a difficult position too. I'll pack my things." As he walked through the hospital corridors for the last time, Michael was approached by colleagues and nurses, many offering words of support and condolences. He said goodbye to each one, thanking them for the time they worked together. In his office, he gathered his belongings slowly, each item carrying memories of years of dedication and hard work. As he closed the door for the last time, he felt a mixture of sadness and relief. He knew he had done the right thing even if the cost was high. Leaving the hospital, the cold night air enveloped him. Michael looked back at the building that had been his second home for so many years. One chapter closes, he thought. With renewed determination, he walked into an uncertain future, but with a clear conscience and the certainty that, regardless of the circumstances, he had upheld his oath to care. Dr. Michael Carter left our hospital feeling a devastating combination of loss and relief. The night was cold and he walked slowly through the streets, each step echoing the loneliness that now seemed to surround him. The city lights flickered in the distance, indifferent to the whirlwind of emotions brewing inside him. Michael couldn't shake the growing sense of emptiness. Arriving home, he was met with the warm embrace of his wife, Laura. "How are you?" she asked, her eyes full of concern. Michael tried to smile but failed miserably. "I've had better days," he replied, his voice faltering slightly. She pulled him close, allowing him to finally break down, silent tears streaming down his face. "Emily and Lucas, His children greeted him with tight hugs, not fully understanding the depth of what had happened, but knowing their father needed love and support. Michael felt grateful for his family, realizing they were his safe harbor in the storm. The following days were an emotional roller coaster. Colleagues and friends from the hospital called and sent messages, expressing their solidarity and support. Dr. Susan Walker, a close friend and colleague, came to visit. "Michael, you did what any good doctor would do. We're all on your side," she said, holding his hand firmly. These words of support were a balm, but they also served as a reminder of the weight of his decision and its impact on his career. Michael found himself in a constant internal battle, trying to balance the certainty of having done the right thing with the reality of being unemployed. As weeks turned into months, Michael began to feel the effects of isolation. The routine he knew and relied on had been ripped from his life. Mornings were especially difficult. With no need to rush to the hospital, he found himself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his cold cup of coffee, his mind wandering down dark paths of doubt and uncertainty. Did I make the right choice? He wondered, recalling the crucial moments that led to his dismissal. The financial pressure was starting to mount, adding another layer of stress. The bills kept coming, and the sense of uselessness grew with each day without work. Laura tried to cheer him up, but Michael couldn't help feeling like a burden. He spent hours walking around the house, looking at the diplomas and certificates that were once a source of pride, but now seemed like relics of a distant and unreachable past. Did I waste everything? He thought, tormented by doubt. Isolation became his greatest enemy. He avoided social gatherings, feeling ashamed and exposed. Friends invited him out, but Michael politely declined, preferring the solitude of his own company. Nights were filled with insomnia, his thoughts swirling in a spiral of regret and hopelessness. On one of those sleepless nights, Michael sat on the living room couch, staring at a photo of his late sister. "I did this for you," he whispered, feeling a deep ache in his chest. He remembered the vow he had made to himself never to abandon someone in need, but now he questioned whether that vow had cost him everything. Amidst this darkness, there was a glimmer of light. Susan, persistent in her support, organized a meeting of former colleagues at a local cafe. Reluctantly, Michael accepted the invitation. When he arrived, he was greeted with warm hugs and words of encouragement. "You're a hero to all of us," said one of the colleagues. "Never forget that." These words began to dispel the clouds of doubt. Michael realized that despite the circumstances, he still had allies, people who believed in him and his commitment to medicine. The gathering brought a breath of hope, a reminder that he was not alone. In the days following the cafe meeting, Michael began to realize the depth of the support he had around him. His wife, Laura, was a pillar of strength and understanding. "We'll get through this together," she said every night as he lay beside her, exhausted from his internal battles. His children, Emily and Lucas, made a point to include their father in their daily activities, from board games to park walks. They sensed their father was lost and wanted to help him find his way back. His closest friends, like Susan Walker, continued to be a constant and encouraging presence. She frequently stopped by his house, bringing coffee and reminiscing about their college days and early years at the hospital. "You've always been the most dedicated doctor I've known, Michael. This is just a phase and we'll find a way out," she said, infusing hope into the darkest moments. His former colleagues at the hospital hadn't forgotten him either. Periodically, they organized informal gatherings where they shared stories, laughed, and most importantly, showed that they still considered him part of the medical family. Every gesture, no matter how small, helped Michael feel less isolated and more connected to the world around him. With the unwavering support of his family and friends, Michael began to find clarity in his mind. He spent hours in his home office, reflecting on his career and the choices that had led him to that moment. The walls were covered with certificates and diplomas, but he saw not just achievements. He saw the sacrifices, the patients he helped, and those he couldn't save. One day, while looking at a photo from his medical school graduation, an idea began to form. Perhaps there were other ways to impact the world beyond the traditional hospital system. He started researching community clinics, medical charity organizations, and health programs in underserved areas. Laura noticed the change in Michael. "You're thinking about something, aren't you?" she asked one night while they were having dinner. Michael smiled for the first time in weeks. Yes, I am. I think there are other ways to use my skills and experience. Something that allows me to help more people, without the hospital's restrictions. The idea of opening a community clinic in Riverside began to take shape. Michael met with community leaders, discussed with retired doctors, and sought advice from nonprofit organizations. He wanted to create a space where everyone was welcome, regardless of their financial situation. A place where he could practice medicine the way he had always dreamed, focused on the patient, not the numbers. Michael also started giving lectures at schools and community centers, sharing his experiences and teaching about preventive health. He realized that educating people could have a lasting and preventive impact, something often neglected in the hospital system. Gradually, his vision gained support and resources. Friends, former patients, and community members contributed what they could, whether with donations or volunteering. Michael felt his purpose renewed, stronger, and clearer each day. He was reevaluating his life not just as a doctor, but as a human being seeking ways to make a difference. Over time, the community clinic became a reality. The grand opening day was a milestone of renewal. Surrounded by his family, friends, and the community he loved, Michael cut the ribbon with a deep sense of gratitude and purpose. He realized that despite the adversities, he had found a new way to fulfill his oath to care, proving that even in the most challenging situations, it is possible to restart and continue to positively impact people's lives. Michael visited the community clinic daily, keeping himself busy with the needs of the community. But one case in particular deeply concerned him, the man he had saved that cold night. After weeks of intensive care and rehabilitation, the homeless man finally began to show significant signs of recovery. John, as he had introduced himself, was a man of few words. During the first days, his conversations with Michael were brief and focused on his medical condition. Over time, however, an unexpected bond began to form. Michael dedicated extra time to talking with John, encouraging him to share his experiences and life stories. One afternoon, as Michael made his usual visit to John's bedside, he noticed something different. There was a light in John's eyes, a clarity that hadn't been there before. "You look better today, John," Michael commented, sitting down next to the bed. John smiled, a timid but genuine smile. "I'm feeling better, doctor. I think I'm finally ready to tell my story." What John revealed that day left Michael stunned. He began to recount his life before becoming homeless. John was actually Jonathan Bennett, a renowned scientist who had mysteriously disappeared years ago. His groundbreaking research in biotechnology had attracted both recognition and enemies. A group of corporate interests, fearing the impact of his discoveries, had threatened his life and that of his family. "To protect my wife and children, I had to disappear," Jonathan explained, his eyes fixed on Michael, who listened intently, incredulous. "Living on the streets was the only way I found to ensure their safety. I lost contact with the world, but at least I knew they were safe." Michael was speechless for a moment. The man before him was not just a homeless person, but someone who had sacrificed everything for those he loved. "Jonathan, your story is incredible. We need to tell the world," Michael said, realizing the depth of the implications of this revelation. Jonathan hesitated but finally agreed. "If it means my family can finally be safe and I can return to my life, then yes, I'm ready to tell my story." The revelation of Jonathan Bennett's true identity caused a media storm. Newspapers, TV stations, and social media exploded with the news of the missing scientist found on the streets of Riverside. Michael, alongside Jonathan, became a central figure in this narrative. For Michael, the public attention brought mixed emotions. On one hand, he was happy to have helped reveal such a significant truth. On the other hand, there was a new spotlight on him in the community clinic, which was now seen as a symbol of compassion and justice. Jonathan, in turn, was reunited with his family in an emotional meeting broadcasted live. The joy of his children seeing their father again was touching, and his wife, with tears in her eyes, thanked Michael personally. "You brought my husband back. I don't know how to thank you," she said, hugging him. The impact of this revelation was profound and lasting. The story of Jonathan and Michael became a beacon of hope, highlighting the importance of compassion and courage. Michael received numerous invitations to speak about his experiences, and the community clinic saw a significant increase in support and resources, allowing them to help even more people in need. The revelation also brought about a change in public perception of the homeless and the issues they faced. Many began to look beyond appearances and recognize the individual stories and struggles each person carried. The story of Jonathan Bennett and Dr. Michael Carter quickly captured the public's imagination. Newspapers, TV channels, and news websites began covering the case enthusiastically. Headlines highlighted Jonathan's incredible sacrifice and Michael's unwavering dedication. Lost Scientist Found, a story of sacrifice and redemption, and heroic doctor saves life, challenges hospital system. Reporters flooded the community clinic, eager for interviews and details. Michael, initially reluctant to be in the spotlight, realized this was an opportunity to highlight important issues about the healthcare system. In several interviews, he spoke about the need to put patients above bureaucratic policies and the importance of empathy in medicine. The public began to rally in support of Michael. Social media was inundated with messages of solidarity and gratitude. Fundraising campaigns for the community clinic sprang up spontaneously, and donations started pouring in from all over the country. People who had never met Michael or Jonathan felt inspired by their story and wanted to contribute in some way. With the growing media attention, the administration of Riverside General Hospital found itself in a delicate position. Dr. Richard Stevens, who had been at the center of the decision to fire Michael, began receiving a flood of criticism. Online petitions demanding Michael's reinstatement gained thousands of signatures, and community leaders pressured the hospital to reevaluate its policies. Under this pressure, the hospital board convened an emergency meeting. There were heated discussions about the possible legal repercussions and the hospital's public image. Stevens, who had always been a proponent of strict rules, now found himself forced to reconsider his stance. The medical community also spoke out, many supporting Michael and condemning the policies that led to his dismissal. After a week of intense deliberations, the hospital publicly announced that it would reevaluate Michael's case. The news was met with relief and celebration by many. Jonathan Bennett, now a symbol of resilience, also spoke out, thanking Michael for saving his life and highlighting the need for systemic changes. In an official ceremony, Dr. Michael Carter was reinstated at the hospital. The conference room was packed with colleagues, friends, and community members who came to show their support. Michael, visibly emotional, received a long applause when he stepped onto the stage next to Dr. Stevens. Stevens took the microphone first. "Today we acknowledge that mistakes were made," he said, his voice heavy with sincerity. Dr. Carter's actions reminded us of the true purpose of medicine, to save lives. On behalf of the hospital, I apologize to Michael and announce his immediate reinstatement. The room erupted in applause once more. Michael, tears welling up in his eyes, took a deep breath before speaking. "Thank you, Dr. Stevens. I am deeply moved by the support I have received from all of you. This experience has reaffirmed my belief in the importance of compassion and dedication in our profession. I am honored to return to my position and continue serving this community." The ceremony was followed by a celebration where Michael was surrounded by friends, family, and colleagues, all expressing their joy and admiration for his courage and resilience. Jonathan Bennett, now looking healthier and more confident, approached Michael with a heartfelt smile. "You changed my life, Michael. I owe you everything." Michael shook his head, smiling back. "You don't owe me anything, Jonathan. We're all in this together." With his reinstatement, Michael resumed his duties at Riverside General Hospital, but his work at the community clinic continued as well. The clinic, now better funded and staffed thanks to the outpouring of support, became a vital resource for the underserved population of Riverside. Michael's dual roles allowed him to impact even more lives, balancing his work between the hospital and the clinic. The story of Dr. Michael Carter and Jonathan Bennett remained a powerful testament to the impact of compassion, integrity, and the relentless pursuit of justice. It inspired many within the medical field to advocate for systemic changes and prioritize patient care over bureaucratic constraints. As the years went by, Michael continued to dedicate himself to his profession with the same passion and empathy that had guided him through his toughest challenges. He often reflected on the journey that brought him to that point, grateful for the support and love of his family, friends, and community. In every life he touched, Michael saw the ripple effects of his actions, a constant reminder that one person's dedication could indeed make a profound difference. His story, intertwined with Jonathan's, became a lasting legacy of hope and humanity, proving that even in the face of adversity, the spirit of compassion and care can prevail and transform lives. Michael thanked everyone, his voice trembling with emotion. "This is a moment of great significance for me. I am grateful for all the support, and am committed to continuing to serve our community with the same dedication and compassion." In addition to reinstating Michael, the hospital announced a series of reforms in its treatment policies. Now, doctors would have more autonomy to make decisions based on the medical needs of patients without fear of administrative repercussions. Ethics and empathy training programs would be implemented for all staff, ensuring that the top priority was always the patient's well-being. The story of Michael and Jonathan brought a wave of renewal, not only to the hospital, but to the entire community. Michael continued his work both at the hospital and at the community clinic, now more motivated than ever. He knew that the fight for justice and compassion was ongoing, but with the community's support and renewed confidence in his mission, he was ready to face any challenge. As Michael settled back into his roles, he noticed a significant change in the atmosphere at the hospital. Colleagues seemed more motivated and inspired, and there was a palpable sense of unity and purpose among the staff. The new policies allowed for a more patient-centered approach, and Michael took every opportunity to mentor younger doctors, instilling in them the values that had guided him throughout his career. At the community clinic, the changes were even more profound. With increased funding and resources, they were able to expand their services, reaching more people in need. Michael spearheaded initiatives to provide comprehensive care, including mental health services, nutrition counseling, and preventive care programs. The clinic became a beacon of hope for the underserved population of Riverside, a place where everyone was treated with dignity and respect. The clinic's success stories multiplied, each one reinforcing Michael's belief in the power of compassion and community support. Patients who had once been on the brink of despair found new hope and health through the dedicated efforts of Michael and his team. The clinic became a model for other communities, demonstrating that with the right resources and a compassionate approach, significant positive change was possible. Jonathan Bennett, now fully recovered and reunited with his family, decided to use his second chance at life to make a difference. He began working with Michael at the clinic, using his scientific expertise to help develop innovative healthcare solutions for the community. His story of resilience and redemption inspired many, and together with Michael, he worked tirelessly to improve the lives of those around him. The bond between Michael and Jonathan deepened as they collaborated on various projects, each bringing their unique strengths to the table. Their partnership symbolized the transformative power of compassion and the impact that one person's dedication can have on countless lives. In recognition of their extraordinary efforts, Michael and Jonathan were honored with numerous awards and accolades. However, the greatest reward for them both was seeing the tangible improvements in the health and well-being of the people they served. As time passed, the clinic's influence continued to grow. Michael and his team trained other healthcare professionals to replicate their model, spreading their philosophy of empathetic, patient-centered care far and wide. The legacy of their work extended beyond Riverside, touching lives across the nation and inspiring a new generation of doctors to prioritize humanity in their practice. Dr. Michael Carter and his community clinic became enduring symbols of hope, a testament to the idea that in the face of adversity, compassion and courage can indeed transform the world. They showed that by standing up for what is right and caring deeply for others, it is possible to create a better, more just society for everyone.